All right, we're going to be doing sort of the inverse of the last panel, which is why AI needed crypto. This is why crypto needs AI. So we're going to really focus in on the application layer, right? How is AI being incorporated into the applications and building new types of stuff, right? That's always kind of been the headache with crypto. It's kind of the joke of like, all right, there's no apps that people use. There's actually some really exciting stuff happening, particularly in the AI stuff. And we've got a lot of the guys that are both building some of the infrastructure and the app layer. So let's just sort of jump right into things, guys. I kind of want to start like, what is the lay of the land? Like, what is the cool stuff that we're building right now? And just like, what types of applications, what types of infrastructures under the hood? Just like, what is the state? How early we? Yeah.
Maybe I can just break it down as basic as possible into the componentry of what's happening. You really have like three layers that are applicable. One is, analytics. Right? How do you use AI to create, perform analytics? One is assets. So how do you use AI and blockchain to interact with assets, be them NFTs or ERC20s or any other tokens? And then the last one is agents. And agents are kind of the character and LLMs that are powered by things like OpenAI, Llama 2, or Mosaic. So different models and LLMs. And those are really the three big components that kind of make up elements that have relationships or can potentially have relationships with blockchain infrastructure, be it, again, tokens or NFTs or otherwise.
I think adding on to that, I think one other really interesting piece of this, and it's kind of in analytics as well, but I think a good way to call it is maybe information accessibility. And I think there's a general gap between information that's in Web 2 and in Web 3. And I think AI, especially large language models, have this really interesting ability to fill in missing metadata to actually be able to connect these two things. And so I think analytics is a really, really great word for a lot of people who use crypto, whether they be devs, analysts, and researchers. But I think it has this really special ability for just very normal people and everyday users that will eventually come on board in just like, what does discoverability and recommendation engines look like, and what does search look like once everything is very interconnected?
Yeah, I like that. So we've got kind of the agent layer, we got sort of the analytics, but also sort of baked into that, I think, is kind of like just the UX layer, because once you've got that open data system that is kind of crypto, it's like, naturally, like all these blockchain interactions are kind of hard, right? Like using an LLM to sort of discern what a user's doing, or even do it before they get there, right? That's kind of where the AI agent comes into place. But like to really kind of, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes behind the scenes. You can't just put an LLM on chain, right? So like, how do you have like an actual agent on chain? Like I know you're building a lot of cool stuff at Future Primitive. Like how does you bring kind of a NFT itself get an agent?
Yeah, so I mean, my background, I was part of the team that launched CryptoKitties, Dapper Labs, worked on NBA Top Shot. So like my context is more from like the NFT as a asset or an object that is ownable, and then how do we kind of like bridge that gap into AI, right? And I think with what Sasha's building with Parallel and a few other projects, we're starting to see this like combination of an NFT that now has a wallet or an account. If you looked up ERC 6551 or token-bound accounts, it automatically links every NFT since CryptoKitties to the latest project to have their own accounts. And what that does is it gives NFTs three new properties. One is asset ownership. You can now have an NFT that owns an NFT that owns an NFT. Or in the context of Parallel, you can have an NFT that owns ERC20s that are resources or minerals or items or swords, right? The second is social identity. So with an NFT that has an account, you can actually log into any interface, right? So you can log in as your Azuki on Uniswap, or log in as your Bored Ape on OpenSea and do trades. And in the context of NPCs, you can now have these characters that live their own life on chain and operate on mainnet or an L2. And then the third one is programmability, which I think Sasha would have a deeper contextual information of like linking an LLM to an NFT to perform on-chain actions on your behalf. From my perspective, I think the future is you talk to your Moonbird, and you're like, hey Moonbird, can you perform MEV on Uniswap? Or hey Doodle, I want you to collect the latest Zora open editions, and it does all the curation for you. And so that's kind of the future that we see with NFTs being like the body, the identity, and the AI being the logic and the brain.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can hop in on this. So I'm just going to kind of take a step back and explain. So I'm one of the founders of Parallel, where we built a very new and popular game that people are playing today, and we've been sharing some work we've been doing on an upcoming game called Parallel Colony. And Colony is a game where we call it a 1.5 player game, where traditionally in a game, if you're playing a single player game, it's a 1 player game. If you're playing with your friends, it's a 2 player game. Colony is the world's first game that's kind of powered by AI in a 1.5 player game. What that means is you're not actually the character that you see running around on the screen. That's an AI. And what you're doing is you're talking to that character and you're suggesting it do things or change, its objectives. And so it's navigating this world, and it's able to obtain items from the world. It's able to buy and sell with each other. It's able to have conversations with other AIs. But you're not the player. The player is the AI, and you're kind of like the angel or the devil on their shoulder, saying like, maybe we should do this. I see that you have this in your plan. Maybe we should try that. And really, what ends up happening is, as this character navigates this world, each one of the assets that either it emergently creates through AI, meaning it came up with an idea, and that idea then calls a stable diffusion image generator, and it mints in 1155, puts it in their wallet that, as a result of blockchain, is inherently scarce, and it then is able to transact on that item, or you can, from the 6551 wallet, take that item away from them and sell it yourself. So essentially, the character is gathering resources, transacting with other AIs in this simulation, and is able to buy, sell, interact with one another, and also NPCs in the game. So it's an entirely new format of game. It's pretty exciting. If you haven't had taken a look about it, I recommend you do. You can check it out on Parallel's Twitter account, Parallel TCG. But essentially, what you have is a game and a simulation where people, are passively playing and are able to dial up and down their engagement with the game. And like, I come from a gaming background where like I can't play 3 hours of Warzone anymore. And so like, how do you still, and I think a large generation of people grew up playing games their whole lives. So like, how do they, with less time, be able to play these games? And I think the answer is really intelligent idle games where the digital assets are inherently scarce as a result of blockchain. And that's what Colony is and what Benny's referring to.
Yeah, and I think a really great theme here is that AI really helps the UX, but also the engagement of Web3. And it's really cool to be able to see that from a gaming perspective and then also an NFT perspective. And I think one area that we think a lot about at Lore is kind of what does it look like from a purely, maybe not a purely, but a strong DeFi perspective, or just a strong understanding perspective, and maybe what does that look like? And I think token-bound wallets are really interesting, but another very interesting correlation to the space is how account-abstracted wallets will also interact with AI. And so when we're not talking maybe about engagement in a game and NFTs, gaining attributes, which is a very really, really cool way of thinking about it, I think account abstraction essentially lets you meets a lot of users where they're at in a different way. So I have a wallet. I can approve this wallet to do things. I can give permissions, and then I can automate things with the help of AI as well. And I think it's a different way of looking at an agent where I can have a large language model be my agent. I give certain permissions for it from my wallet, and because we spent this time, once again, AI is really good at this, indexing a lot of on-chain information, adding metadata to what function does what on these large protocols, I can tell it what I want it to do, or I can have a conversation with it, and it can smartly execute these actions on-chain. I think it's a really interesting perspective of I'm not, I think, very deep into the NFT or the gaming community, and so this is where a lot of our thought is. Slightly different perspective on what does that look like on more so the DeFi front or the automation layer front as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's, we're kind of parsing out what I sort of think is we're calling it new applications and stuff, but it's really not new applications per se. It's the applications we got. It's DeFi, it's gaming, it's NFTs, whatever it is. It's really how do I interact with that, whether it's passively or whatever. So it's almost like this, almost a parallel application that's running at the same time. And I think that's actually a unique way to sort of think about what we're building here. I'd be interested to sort of dig into where's the special sauce? Where is okay, LLM's running. How is it not gimmicky? Where is it? How do we know that this is real, if you will?
Yeah, I can give you some
yeah,
real world examples from a gaming standpoint. So one example is your character. You're talking to this. This is stuff that happened in test in our own environments for the game we're making. And so one of the employees started spamming chat, talking to his character, saying, "Listen to me, listen to me, listen to me." The character dropped what they were doing and made a beeline for the medical bay. And you can see the conversation between the character and the medical bay attendant. And the character says, "I need medical help." And the medical bay, the medic says, "Why?" And the character says, "I'm hearing voices in my head and they won't stop." And so it's responding to, the spam messages that one of my employees who was testing it created, and it's saying, "I'm not well," as mentally. And another example is of really interesting emergent behavior is one of the colonies, and this is actually quite common if you've ever read the Voyager research papers on AI, is colonies will end up spiraling into like a death spiral a bit, especially if you give them attributes like health and energy and happiness. And one of the people who was interacting with an AI in a 14-person colony, a 14 AI colony, said, "The colony is not doing so well. When I'm not happy, my mother makes me mint tea." And so what the AI decided to do was go to the garden, plant mint, and then it went and gathered the mint. So it gives it an 1155 of mint leaves, and then goes to the medical, the kitchen, the culinary area, makes a cup of mint tea. So it burns the 1155 of mint. It gives it a cup of mint tea, and it started handing them out. And the AI that governs this world attributed each one of these characters +2 health and +2 happiness. And so it's very emergent, and what that means is it can kind of evolve with the interests and inputs of the human. But what that also means is that what it generates as an on-chain asset, the mint leaves, the mint tea, it's inherently scarce, and it requires time, almost like time and effort, almost like mining wood. In that a character plants the mint, it won't be able to gather it and harvest it for 24, 48 hours, whatever that time duration is. And so there's a lot of really interesting kind of ways, and from a gaming standpoint, in which this creates a much deeper experience for players, but also inherently has implications for digital assets from an NFT standpoint or an ERC20 standpoint, because the characters are using Prime, the ERC20 that our world runs on, and they can use it to buy things from one another and more.
I don't know about how you feel, but I got goosebumps listening to that. I mean, that's what you're witnessing here is, I know this crowd is not too big, but I think in the coming years, this is going to be huge. And you extrapolate from the world that Sasha has built with Parallel to the entire NFT ecosystem, which is hundreds of millions of NFTs, and being able for them to have logic and do these activities that could be games or on-chain DeFi trades and swaps. It starts to open up a whole new different world of, it's beyond just non-fungible tokens. It's like objects and personhood that's autonomous on chain and doing all these things. So it's really mind-blowing.
Yeah, and this isn't the future. We have demonstrations of this running today. You can, again, check out our Twitter account. You can see what we've built. But I think the way to think about this is you've got this generalized intelligence system, and what you really want to do is you want to give it directive. And the directives are in a game are don't die, right? Or accumulate wealth, or support your teammates. And so you kind of give it these directives, and then and really your objective as a player is to optimize and adjust and fine-tune what it's doing. And again, what that does is it gives really deep gameplay, really interesting interactions with characters that otherwise hasn't been achieved before. And that's why I think a lot of people refer to Parallel as an entirely new category of game, because we haven't had a game where AI is the player and you're kind of its supporting agent, helping it work through its situations and circumstances that it's encountering. And I think we're seeing some people refer to these types of games, and I want to hear what you have to say as well about analytics and data. But we're seeing some of these people refer to some of these games as never-ending games, because there is no win condition. You don't ever win. And the response that we've seen from people who play these games is stuff when we've done a test is make sure my character doesn't die. And they think they're alive. Yeah. That's how compelling this is.
Yeah. I think I think that's generally from like a gaming perspective. I think it's very very cool to see where AI takes you, and I think like Benny was saying, it really does give you goosebumps when you think about what is it like, what type of what does gaming look like when I'm not the main character, where I'm just influencing the character, and what does strategy look like around that, and I think it really opens up this whole new world, which is just it's super super cool. And Dustin, I guess going back to the question and maybe answering it from a little bit more from Laura's perspective and trying what we're building there. For us, it really goes back to kind of like the infrastructure level and kind of what work still needs to be there. And Sasha, I think a lot of the work you're doing is like on the cutting edge of all this stuff. And in crypto and Web3, we have these technical advances literally almost every week. We have like shared sequencers. Now we have shared data availability. Optimus is doing super chain. Like there's just so many novel technological advances. And the way that we're kind of thinking about this on Lore is like, how does this all get relayed to the end user who will eventually use it? And Parallel, I think, is a really good thing. It's a game, so it's like the user's immersed in it. But for a lot of these things, it's like it almost always ends up in hashes, or always like to the end user, it always ends up confusing. And so a big thing at Lore, what we're trying to do is like be the UX layer for a lot of these things are just where the technology is really just outstripping the end user. And how can we use AI to patch in the understanding? Because a lot of these things are extremely complicated, like LLMs, just generally even token bound accounts, all these things. It's very hard to explain to the people who are using. And I think that's like another really interesting way where AI is kind of like secret sauce, where it's like we can take the smart contract, we can take the actions that happen, we can take the logs, and we can synthesize to a user who's just trying to understand what's going on, exactly what's happening. And I think that's a really large, apart from things being really cool, when you're thinking about comfort, utility, and a user psyche in a space, you're not going to get adoption of any space if someone's uncomfortable in it. And so for us, like AI is a lot about how can we make sure that the information is presented to the user such that they're very comfortable, such that they want to spend more time in crypto and find games like Parallel. And after they do a swap or do anything like that, they know exactly what happened, and they can relay that information. Especially for, I think, on the financial, like Turkey, I think is at like 55% of its people use crypto. Really, really interesting. Crypto works where it needs to work, but making sure that everyone there is comfortable using a completely new financial rails. So I know a little bit of a different answer than kind of what Benny and Sasha have here, but maybe just another perspective on also how, on an infrastructure level, AI is really changing the game as well.
If I can say one last thing, like I think principally, I think this is like the key takeaway is like natively digital intelligence should, to have natively digital assets, it's uniquely possible with blockchain. To have scarcity preserved, it's uniquely possible for intelligence that is AI to have scarce on-chain assets, such that they like. If you're going to have digital intelligence, they're likely going to have digital possessions, and that's inherently, facilitated by blockchain. It doesn't matter which blockchain, but like that's how you can achieve it.
100%, right? I mean, you can't. If it's a digital object, it knows digital world. It's got to be a digital object that it owns and interacts with.
Yeah, we have possessions, right?
Yeah.
And so why would a digital intelligence not have possessions? And how do you maintain the scarcity of those possessions on chain?
And the scarcity thing is a really good point, right? Because obviously everything before blockchain was just not scarce, right? It's you can copy paste a tweet, blah blah blah. And when you were talking earlier, when you're planting seeds in the garden, all this kind of stuff, business brain, like that's a whole new economy, right? That's like, these are now goods. These are like, you can imagine we have an economy in this world, like these are kind of almost offshoots. Like instead of going to an alien world and mining some bullshit, like it's in the game, right? It's like, go ahead.
Yeah, like there's even AI used in that process, right? So essentially what happens is an agent talks to what we call a dungeon master AI, and this governs like the consistency of a world. The dungeon master AI says like, because we're a sci-fi game, you don't want it to like go off and say like make a whole bunch of like 1980s birthday balloons or something. Like it just breaks the illusion of the world. And so the dungeon master, if it says yes to something, and it says like I want to create mint tea, what it does is it calls a trained version of Stable Diffusion, and it says generate an image that's consistent with the theme of the world, and mint that image on Base, which is Coinbase's blockchain. Mint that image on Base and deposit it to the wallet belonging to the AI character. And what that means, and Benny is obviously from 6551 team, like what that means is that that intelligence, that digital intelligence is able to transact on that item and walk up to someone else and say, hey, you have minerals, that I want because I want to craft something. I have this mint tea. Would you like to transact? And that can be item for item. That can also be ERC20 for item. And so essentially you could have, and we've seen this before as well, AIs that accumulate immense wealth that you could literally remove from their 6551 wallet and go and trade for, something on Uniswap.
And I think that's kind of a cool point too, because like it kind of feels like it's starting with gaming, right? It's like, okay, but if everything kind of is a game, right? To kind of take the meta thing, like with your social strategy on Twitter is a game you're playing, right? How do I get more followers? How do I like sell more newsletter subscriptions? Like,
yeah. Like when you have because Parallels game Colony is a simulation game.
Yeah.
And like very much when you start to talk to these characters, you very much start to believe that this is all a simulation.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're like, okay, this is pretty compelling. Like we did this demo with the public where we stopped internally testing it. We let people try it. And then for like even till this day, like months later, people still message us who tried it and are like, hey man, like make sure you backed up the like character I had. Like I want that person to stay alive. And you're like, alive, right? Because it's that compelling.
That's pretty crazy. And that's like in the game and stuff too, but like I feel like that's definitely gonna be a thing, like with AI boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever it is. Like I know you've talked a little bit more with like the Lens team, right? Because you've got gaming on one end, and then like, okay, maybe it's like social on the other end. Maybe touch a little bit of like what's possible there, what's kind of cooking in the kitchen, if you will.
Yeah, if you look really closely, I mean, everything we're centering around is the idea that an NFT has an identity and has the ability to transact and has the AI side, right? If you actually take a step back, what is being constructed here is a token graph of relationships and ownership, right? You can see the parallel character owning these currencies or these tokens, and how does it interact with another character, and when you zoom out, you see a whole graph of relationships. And that's the foundation for any social network, right? Any decentralized social network is based on a graph structure, right? And if you think about it, up until now, before ERC 6551 or token-bound accounts, the whole relationship has been a wallet like MetaMask, and you have NFTs all in a single dimensional layer, right? There was no depth to it, and now we've created depth, right, where an NFT can have infinite amounts of relationships. And so projects like Lens Protocol, for version 2 of their entire project, profiles are going to be using token-bound accounts, and every kind of interaction you do on chain, whether that's liking or a follow or all of those activities, it's going to mint things inside of the TBA to construct this token graph, right? One step further, we have actually an event that's happening right now till 8:30. It's called NPC Day, and a really interesting demo that Lens is going to do is that an NFT is going to post automatically on Lens. They're going to log in as a NFT, and it's going to mint its own post, and then we could kind of see a whole social network which is based on NPCs interacting with each other from a content side, entertainment side, that is kind of opposite from a gaming side, right? Or similar depending on how you see it.
Yeah, I think like I think one thing that's interesting is quantifying some of this stuff. So we had 14 AIs in a simulation playing Colony, and in 48 hours they did 3,200 transactions with each other on chain.
Okay.
And so I think like what that also, like if you step back and think about that, what that could mean is that like underutilized networks that are looking for use cases may be looking towards having some of these types of AI to AI economies occur, because now you have utilization of the network. They're trading on-chain scarce resources. They have the ability to pay for their own monthly subscription cost, right? And so I think like there's something happening there that's also really interesting, and I think it's important to quantify like what this might look like.
Yeah. I think going also on top of that, I think one really interesting theme as well is how, specifically alongside crypto, how AI kind of enables interoperability. And so when you take, when you take kind of a game like all these transactions are on chain, and they're going to have their relevant logs, they're going to have whatever they emit. And especially when you're able to, if you're a solo developer or you want to build on top of maybe the parallel universe, or you want to build something that I think crypto is really interesting, because you can always build secondary markets off of anything that's scarce as well, which is a very unique option, just creating localized markets. What I think we're eventually going to be able to see is these are going to be springing up faster and faster, almost to the point where they may even be to a partial level automated, because you're going to get this ingestion of smart contract data. You're going to have even like a side agent that's there. It's interoperable, and it's going to be able to do secondary and tertiary function based off of something that's the main thing per se. So I just think generally on that lens, just like interoperability is like another interesting theme in terms of how AI will impact crypto in the years to come.
Yeah, I totally agree on the interoperability. That's just the whole open data thing in general, right? And like that's building some of the frameworks to make that happen. I think another angle is like better or worse is like kind of the financialization side of things. Like take the social example, right? In FinTech, right? If it's posting on FinTech or whatever it is and it's earning money, like you as a person that's just sort of designing the content strategy, you can sort of think of like if I spend $1,000 on this bot, I can make $500 a week, whatever it is. And even inside of the game, I don't know. Can you sell game items inside of the parallel?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You can take the items away from your agent or your character, or the character can decide to sell them. So like we've seen instances where you've given your character a bunch of ERC20 Prime, and they've gone to the bar and drank themselves stupid, right? Like it happens, right? So like you kind of have to be like okay with the digital intelligence being able to utilize their own wallet as they see fit, and like give them parameters and directive as to what they're using those things for. I think we're just like super early at the intersection of what's possible between AI and blockchain. Like recently there was a thread that was super interesting to me. Was someone just simply made a way to interact with an AI, and if you interacted with it, it would like emit tokens if you like answered questions correctly or something. And like even that as like a distribution method for ERC20 is different. It's different. And so I think we're like at a very early point in the discovery of how these two things interact. But what we know for certain is that on one hand, we've got digital intelligence. On the other, we've got natively digital assets. And they somehow are going to intersect.
And I think to kind of like start closing up, the movement that we're all part of right here is a movement that is counter to speculation. I think in the NFT space or even in the crypto space, oftentimes we get really caught up with like the speculative aspects of owning assets. And right now for NFTs, for the last 6 years, it's been floor price, total volume, royalties, all of this. And if you hear what we're actually talking about here, it's about engagement. It's about on-chain transactions. It's about utility, right? Whether that's you controlling it or the AI or both, having a partnership, right? It's all about using your NFT assets on chain, and that for us is like the second movement for NFTs. The first one, which was in 2017 with 721, was you could own a digital object. Now 6 years later in 2023, you should use this digital object for things on chain, right?
Can I get a show of hands of anyone here who has collected or collects like Pokemon cards or Magic cards? Okay, cool. So before we're finished up here today, there's the head of game design for Parallel is here. We have a bunch of pre-production cards as well to give away. So if you want to find us before we leave, we've got some really cool cards, and if you're into that stuff, you should grab one because they're awesome.
Yeah, I'll kind of add my final thoughts as well. One thing I think is a really good theme from all of this is I think AI will kind of bring Web3 into its end state over kind of the next like 5, 10, 15 years. And a large part of that, I think, will be a safe way to have hyper-personalized recommendation engines that really cater to what a user does. And the best part about this is that I think it very much will be safe. So you're going to have these models, they're going to be protected, it's going to be your data. That's what crypto enables for AI, which I think was talked about recently, like previously. But when you talk about all these things that you or your AI agent or the AI agent you're interacting with on chain, once that can all be indexed, understood, and connected in a vector graph and index, you essentially get this like hyper-personalized experience catered just for you. And that has massive implications when it becomes the financial rails for a large part of the world. If I'm just using it to send and receive money, and then I also play Parallel, what other things can I do in crypto, and how can that be personalized to me as well?
Yeah, like on that note, like I think the way to think about this is as a relationship. And I was skeptical. I'm going to be very frank. Like, we were making one game and we started to work on this, and I was very skeptical that anyone would like be able to build a relationship with their character over time that was so meaningful that they'd be upset if you turned it off. And like that has been completely debunked. And the way it works is really like you've got a general intelligence, and then you've got context, and that context is, oh, this world is a sci-fi world. Then you've got a prerogative that you give it, which is keep yourself alive, make yourself wealthy, and then you've got character traits that you can set. It's like, is my character determined? Is my character ambitious? Is my character political? And as you start to interact with this character, be it in the context of analytics, be it in the context of a game, it becomes quite compelling, the relationship that you establish with them. And I think that we're starting to see that with, friendship avatars that are existing, be them not on chain or on chain. But we see it as a game, as an extremely sticky relationship that once you've built an affinity between yourself and your character, like it's almost like a very smart Tamagotchi or a pet, right? Like that's the level of what you should be expecting, and it will surprise you. I'm like the first one to say, like, I almost killed this project when we first started it because I was like, how good can it be? And I played it for like 2 hours and was like, this is so sticky that you'll never stop paying a subscription fee or logging in to check on your character or whatever it is. And I think that's something that everyone should be cognizant of here, irrespective of the application that you explore in your own independent business.
All right, I think that's a great way to end it. This is super exciting, and thank you guys for all joining us here.